Welcome back to the Crypto Clown World podcast. It is the 25th of May, 2024. I am your host with the honks, Jason Bruce, honking back in. As always, I have my co-host here, Mr. Christopher Lundy. How are you doing today, sir?
Hey. How's it going?
It's
Remember
going,
that
man.
show?
Yeah,
Fat Albert from
Fat
back in the
Albert.
day?
Hey, hey, hey.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I remember Fat Albert, man. Spent many days at the Chinese babysitters next door to my grandma's watching Fat Albert. Um,
Nice.
yeah, yeah, they had some pretty wild stuff there, actually. They were kind of hoarders, and
Oh,
their
dear.
their son unfortunately had a genetic defect, so he had a bit of a retardation. But they spoiled the heck out of him, and he pretty much had like everything that you could think of that was kind of like vintage or from like 60s, 70s, and 80s. So like all the old like large GI Joe figurines, all the like old Marvel and DC comics, stuff like that. So it was a pretty interesting place to kind of grow up a little bit and see some different things. They also used to cook authentic Chinese food. There used to be crabs running around on the kitchen floor.
And there's, well, I guess the pun is going to be there regardless, but, sometimes you got to take Robert Downey Jr.'s advice from Tropic Thunder and never go full retard.
Yeah, there is a line to draw there for sure. Um, yeah, we got a lot of retarded stuff going on, to be completely honest, to segue into that.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully,
Oh, yeah.
hopefully I won't get demonetized for whatever the like 25 cents that YouTube is paying me for the episodes here, but um, yeah, there's a lot going on both on the market side, and I know you got a lot of really interesting news here, news that could potentially impact people just in terms of not just what they do in crypto, but kind of just how they would operate in their daily lives with a lot of things, and a lot of people not even realizing it. We're we're
Indeed.
we're in a state right now where there's kind of a slowly encompassing and encircling and growing panopticon, right? So,
Right.
uh, with all that said, I'll segue into your top story today, which is pretty mind blowing if people haven't heard about it.
Indeed. Thank you, Jason. So, first part of this episode is going to be covering operational security. And my saying for operational security is not optional. Use it or lose it. And I mean exactly what I say in this context because as of May the 20th, there is an announcement from Microsoft that all copies of the Windows operating system will be forcibly installed with an application called Recall. So if you use a Windows computer, that's approximately 70% of the people listening to this podcast or across the world, frankly. If you're using a Windows computer, now is the time to start reconsidering your choice here. If the previous 4 years didn't wake you up, perhaps this will. So, Microsoft have announced the introduction of Recall, which is an artificial intelligence feature that's being built into all of their new Windows Copilot computers, PC specifically. And it takes a screenshot of your active screen every few seconds and uses AI to analyze them, which means that Microsoft and any of its you know uh, employees will have access to everything that you do on your computer in real time, including your passwords, your private data, everything. Which means that all of this is going to be very easily able to be hacked because they're literally spying on your operating system in real time right in front of your face. Okay. So here are the key features. It's AI powered analysis, and keep in mind Microsoft's AI backend is OpenAI's Chat GPT, which has been shut down in multiple countries due to privacy concerns. Rolls out on the Copilot PCs. It's going to roll out in updates to older versions later, and it will take up to approximately 20 gigabytes of space on every device, which is going to throttle your speed. And in the event of a theft, the hackers will have access to everything, including your passwords. And interestingly, the UK government has immediately opened a legal investigation into the technology, which means that, at least from my perspective, that these changes are being made without any consultation, to any government. That should tell you a lot. So, if you're looking for an alternative, ladies and gentlemen, the most secure alternative is going to be Cubes OS, and that's spelled QUBES, Cubes OS. And that is a distribution of Linux that is the top recommendation of cybersecurity professionals and espionage professionals, most specifically Edward Snowden. So and I have tested Cubes OS myself, and it used to be a very difficult operating system to run, but now it's as easy or just as easy as a standard Windows or Apple installation. So this is imperative, ladies and gentlemen. This is no longer an option. If you're running a Windows computer and if you're doing anything with crypto, be prepared to kiss your entire asset classes goodbye if you're running a Windows computer. This is now absolutely urgent. If you have any of your coins stored on a Windows computer and you're still using it right now, you're going to have to do a massive OPSEC flush. You're going to have to stand up new wallets. You're going to have to stand up new passwords. You're going to have to do it in separate rooms. You're going to have to start taking your security very, very seriously, because this is a very serious threat. Okay. And it's time to start using free open source operating systems. If you're looking for something that's a little easier to use and easier to install and manage, Linux Mint is also a good choice. But Linux Mint and Cubes OS have excellent development. They're very easy to install and use, and there are plenty of places you can get them. And this is the future of technology, ladies and gentlemen. These types of things that Microsoft is doing will lead eventually to Microsoft going bankrupt. That sounds unthinkable to people, but let's not forget about juggernauts like Kmart, Sears, and Montgomery Ward. You see any of those on a street corner near you anywhere? No? There's a reason for that. Okay. Nothing lasts forever, ever. So keep that in mind. Stop using technology that abuses you, or you're going to continue to get abused in very serious ways, including financially. Okay. Don't go there. Moving on. Twitter, now stylized as X, has changed their creator monetization standards with quote, updated eligibility criteria, close quote. So here is the announcement from X, and this I'll quote directly. Quote, we're making changes to our creator subscriptions and ads revenue share programs to further promote authenticity and fight fraud on the platform. Starting today, all new creators must verify their identification to receive payouts. All existing creators must do so by July 1st, 2024. Okay. Now, the company that is going to be doing these checks is called AutoTix. Now, they were formerly the technology arm of ICTS International. They're an identity verification company that's based in Hod HaSharon, Israel. And they were founded in 2002. And the CEO of AutoTix, his name is Ron Atzman. Okay. Their services include multi-channel ID, document authentication, and record generation. Now, Ron Atzman, who's the founder of AutoTix, he spent his military service with the Shin Bet Unit 8200. Now, the staff numbered between approximately 5 to 10,000 people. That unit is Israel's main intelligence strike force, providing it with 90% of its intelligence material. Keep in mind, main intelligence strike force, meaning that this technology will be used to identify your face and add you to a target list. So if you're on X and you're a creator that's monetized, it's time to stop using creator monetization on those platforms and use something such as Subscribestar that doesn't want to put you on a target list. Let's remind the audience, ICTS International was the security firm that was responsible for the security at the airports on 9/11. Okay, and we all know how that day ended for America and what it thrust us into in the years and decades that have followed it. So, from my perspective, I've never used Twitter or X. I've never used Facebook in any capacity. Never have, never will, because I knew that they were military projects from the beginning. And that's one of the biggest advantages to my time in the technology industry, is I got to see a lot of these things behind the scenes, and I had to consider all of these security and potential security threats uh, with some degree of honesty, right? But let's go into this a little bit more deeply, right? So whenever you're dealing with targeting systems, it's not just this. Okay, this targeting technology also exists in the Windows operating system, the Apple operating system for iPhones and for desktops, specifically for iPhones. Takes an infrared picture of your face every 5 seconds and has been doing so for years. Since before the COVID event. So keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen. There's a reason why these influencers want you to pay with your face. It's easier to target you that way, right? So don't let yourself get sucked in to trends or influencer mumbo jumbo, as I've stated in previous episodes. Moving on. So there's a very interesting Blockworks article that I picked up on this week, and actually it was published today at 10 o'clock this morning. And it's a dual article that's by Matthew Nymerg and Christian Walker. And the leader on it is private stablecoins will be the bedrock of on-chain commerce. That's quite a statement, ladies and gentlemen, because there aren't a lot of private stablecoins that actually have any liquidity, so to speak, in any real capacity that are truly private, right? So here's the leader. One of the most common misconceptions about blockchain technology is that it's synonymous with privacy. Instead, the reality is that public blockchains like Bitcoin or Ethereum are more of an open book than a lockbox of user information. They're transparent by default, not private by default. And every single transaction that takes place on them is visible to anyone using a block explorer. While that has plenty of benefits, including fulfilling the so-called dream of a more accountable financial system, which I've spoken to in other interviews not related to the podcast, it has drawbacks too, because when it comes to commerce, other use cases, some variations in how these blockchains are implemented might be appreciated by end users and enterprise projects alike. And they go on to state that private stablecoins in particular are key to this type of adoption. And it goes on to state that parity with traditional finance is the least we can do, because and they make a good point here, because your bank account balance isn't visible to the world. Why should your wallet balance be, right? So have a look at that article and give it a read, because it's I haven't seen anything like that in the crypto space uh, of late, or at least since I entered the space, outside of very small niche groups and smaller followings. But it's good to see that this is starting to gain traction, especially in light of the Windows recall news and the Twitter X monetization news. So let's move on to economics. So the biggest news that we have this week is going to be a pretty significant repricing action of precious metals. So on Monday of this week, Shanghai silver hit an 8% limit up. Gold rose about 3%. Copper was up about 5.5%. And then copper later had a 7% limit up. Nickel went as high as 5.4% up, tin 5%, zinc 3%, aluminum 2.3%. Even iron ore rose by just under 2%, and steel rebars were up. Rebar, ladies and gentlemen, was up 1% for rebar, right? So what does this mean? That means that anything that's not a currency, that has value, that's a metal, is going to skyrocket. Whenever you're seeing nickel going up 5%, and it's on pace with copper and on pace with silver, that means your silver, your copper, and your nickel coins that you can get in the United States of America are soon going to be far, far more valuable than their face value. So if you're a coin collector, if you're simply somebody that's trying to change up your stack strategy, start coin roll hunting. Get yourself boxes of nickels. A box of nickels might be worth 10 grand in 5 years. We don't know. A box of copper pennies might be worth something similar. Small denomination coins that are worth more than their face value are how you stack anything coin related, whether you're a coin collector, precious metals investor, or whatever. That's a very inexpensive way to gain access to something that has higher long-term returns at face value rather than paying full price for it. So the long-term coin roll hunters are now vindicated. Congratulations to the ladies and gentlemen that are coin roll hunters that listen to the show. So let's get into the burning issues of geopolitics. So I didn't know this until recently, but Russia is purportedly planning on an Afghan oil hub. And there is a Zero Hedge article that was published on May the 20th that is entitled Analyzing the Strategic Importance of Russia's Reportedly Planned Afghan Oil Hub. And this was authored by Andrew Karipko via Substack. So let's have a look at this particular article leader. I'll read a few paragraphs. So, quote, continued maritime exports to the Indian Ocean region across the Baltic, Black, and Mediterranean seas might be deemed strategically undependable due to tensions with the West, hence the need to pioneer a more reliable alternative. What this basically means is that Russia is trying to find an oil hub outside of the hot zone because they consider the Baltic Sea, the Black Sea, and the Mediterranean Sea to be no-go zones for transiting their oil. So they need a safer region that is not bogged down by war. Ironically, in Afghanistan, which fought a very long, brutal, and bloody 20-plus year war against the United States of America, in which they successfully drove the Americans from the region and from the country. So, moving on to more of the quotes from the article. Afghanistan's acting industry and trade minister, his name is Nuruddin Azizi. He told Reuters earlier this month that his country agreed with Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan to build a logistics hub in its northwestern Herat province, which he said would also facilitate the export of Russian oil to South Asia. South Asia is going to be like India, Bangladesh, those places, Sri Lanka, via road and rail routes. The outlet noted that he's particularly optimistic about Russia exporting this resource to Pakistan in the coming future, although they've yet to reach a strategic energy deal despite several years of negotiations. Now, even in the absence of one, it might be more convenient for Russia to export oil to India and other countries in its namesake oceans region via the north-south transport corridors, Arabian Sea, and Gulf ports, which Herat is connected to by the new railway to Iran's border town of Kahaf, or Kaf. I'm quite sure how to pronounce that. Continued maritime exports to the region across the Baltic, Black, and Mediterranean seas might be deemed strategically undependable due to, quote, tensions with the West, hence the need to pioneer a more reliable alternative, close quote. So expect to see different transport routes and alternative transport routes to get around these hot zones. And that's going to be the main driver of maintaining world commerce because of how much oil comes out of the Baltic, Black, and Mediterranean seas. Let's not forget that Norway has a considerably sized oil market, nowhere close to that of Russia, but they take their oil through the Baltic Sea as well. So that's that tells me that Russia knows that those three seas are going to be no-go zones for oil transport, which means that the ports and the people that are depending on that oil aren't going to have a lot of it. That is very telling. So we'll see what plays out. Moving on. As reported last week, Red Lobster has officially filed for bankruptcy this week. That happened on Monday. Now, there's a little bit more intel I wanted to share with our listeners about Red Lobster's bankruptcy, more details that are important. Now, Red Lobster has changed hands at least once. Darden Restaurant sold the chain quite a few years ago, and it was eventually picked up by a Thai-based hedge fund. Now, this hedge fund decided to make the endless shrimp promotion a permanent menu item, mainly so that they could offload the massive stocks of shrimp that they were catching off of the Thai coast. And that wasn't really the problem, right? The problem was the fact that in the deal, that was most recently brokered with Red Lobster when it was most recently bought out by this hedge fund. It was stipulated that the ownership of the land was no longer going to be Red Lobster's land. So they then had to start paying rent. Prior to that time, they owned all the locations that they operated from, which is why they were able to stay profitable even though they had high prices, right? Because they owned their locations. Well, that was no longer the case after that change. And they had to pay higher and higher and higher rents. So as a result, the hedge fund squeezed the restaurants, extracted as much profit from them as they could through forcing them to pay rent to such an extent that they're planning on closing up to 1/5 of all of their restaurants. And anytime a company loses 20% of its revenue generation, its long-term and short-term future are very likely to be very poor, if not terminally poor. So I just wanted to add that for context. So there is a geopolitical situation that is developing that has both Russian and European involvement within the French periphery of France's historical empire, and that is specifically New Caledonia. This week, significant riots have broken out in New Caledonia, and the capital of New Caledonia, I believe, is Noumea. Noumea. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that. It could be something different. It could be Yves Dupas. I know very little about New Caledonia, but this damage that was reported in these two cities and nearby towns has affected buildings, public facilities, economic structures. And this is according to the public prosecutor. Actually, the name of the prosecutor is Yves Dupas, not the city. Excuse me. Now, specifically, 400 establishments, including shops, hypermarkets, which I suppose should be read supermarkets, and businesses have been destroyed or damaged, causing significant losses financially. Now, the New Caledonian Chamber of Commerce and Industry has called for the preservation of the, quote, little that remains, close quote, of the archipelago's economy. They estimate that over 150 businesses has been looted and burned, leaving more than 1,000 employees out of work. There's no more, as of right now, there's a more than 1 billion euros worth of damage. My take on the situation is there are emboldened, shall we say, actors, not just in places like New Caledonia, but also in West Africa, that are aligning themselves more closely with Russia and doing everything in their power to cut ties with the West because of their, horrible missteps with COVID and the wars and things related to the food supply and with economic policy and things of this nature. And I suspect that these types of situations are going to increase in other, third world periphery or imperial colonies, current or former. That appears to be a trend that will be picking up some steam. Not in the distant future, but in the short to near term future. More financial news. The EU Council Press, through their Twitter X account, has put out a tweet that reads as follows, and I quote, "Foreign interference is a threat to our democracies," ahead of hashtag EU elections 2024. EU Council today approved conclusions on safeguarding electoral processes from all forms of foreign influence. Now, or foreign interference, excuse me, close quote. So what does this mean? Well, they've approved the use of income from the Russian central bank's frozen assets to aid the Kiev regime, and 90% of those funds will go to the armed forces of Ukraine. And this is per the Foreign Ministry of the Czech Republic. So this means that the formal weaponization of economics has begun. Russia seized $440 million from JP Morgan Chase. We seized a decent amount of money from them via the EU, and now this money is being funneled back into Ukraine. So That should tell you a lot, ladies and gentlemen, because these regimes that purportedly have all this money have literally wiped out all of their military infrastructure. All the money went there and got blown to bits. So now they have to steal it from Russia to keep going. That is how, quote, strong, a close quote, the position of the West is in relation to this particular conflict. And it's also very clearly an act of desperation and a sign of impending failure of these institutions. Big changes are coming to major governmental institutions in Europe and in the West. Heard it here first. Now, I did not cover this at the top of the show because there's so much to cover, but there have been several attempted and successful assassination attempts, both of world leaders and of spies taking out other spies that I've covered in previous shows. Now, there was a very peculiar event that happened with Nikol Pashinyan, who's the prime minister of Armenia, had to make an emergency landing of his helicopter due to turbulence and bad weather. Interesting. And ended up having to land his plane in almost a textbook way, very similar to what happened with the delegation that was holding the former president of Iran, Ibrahim Raisi, and his foreign minister, who died this week in that helicopter crash. So here's a basic description. And this is a description of the crash accident, which included the Iranian president's helicopter. And this is the words of his chief of staff, who was present in the third helicopter that was behind them. And this is a transcription of what he said, quote, "After our noon prayers, we departed towards the direction of Tabriz. The weather was clear. There was no weather condition to be worried about. After half an hour being in the air prior to reaching the Sungun copper mine, the small patch of clouds." The interviewer asked, quote, "So there was no fog," close quote. He replied, "Not at all. There was fog on the ground, but not up in the air where we were advancing with the helicopters. However, in one small compacted area, there was a small patch of clouds above a cliff. In terms of height, the cloud was on the same height as our flight's height." Very interesting. It was there when the now martyred helicopter pilot, who was also the commander of the fleet, that told the rest of the pilots to ascend above the clouds. We were the third pilot behind the president's helicopter. We came above the clouds. We advanced for approximately 30 seconds. Our pilot slowly realized that the main helicopter carrying the president was missing. The interviewer asks, quote, "You didn't see the helicopter anymore after the ascending," close quote. And he replied, "Yes, exactly. After ascending above the clouds, we didn't see the main helicopter. The ascension itself didn't feel difficult or hard. Sometimes when we use the plane, we feel turbulence, but we didn't feel anything at all inside the helicopter this time when ascending. And after we ascended, there were no other clouds," close quote. I won't go through the entire interview, but take from that what you will, ladies and gentlemen. And also, I would encourage everyone to have a look at the geoengineering patent that was published in 2022 that specifically details how to utilize graphene oxide for cloud seeding, and that was published in 2022. So, not saying that was the cause of the crash, not saying that was the cause of the turbulence or the fog, but still worth reading. So, moving on. Australia's Prime Minister, I believe it's Anthony Albanese, has formally called for ending the imprisonment of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. And I would say the reason for this is very simple: is that the political pressure that's behind the situation in Levant is also behind the situation with Mr. Assange, who has been locked up or forced to be in a state of where he was locked up in one way or another for the last 14 years. So I would say that holding somebody for 14 years without charges of any crime that they committed, which they haven't put forth any. There was one charge of a sexual offense that was later dropped, and it was actually recanted by the accusers, who later claimed that they were pressured to give their testimony. They They do not say by whom. So with that in mind, Mr. Assange also received approval to appeal his extradition on First Amendment grounds. And the chances of him being released likely increase as a result of Australia's Prime Minister calling for this, because he's, technically speaking, breaking rank with the United States as it relates to this. Moving on to more economic news, and there's some tasty tidbits here, ladies and gentlemen. So Beijing, China, the regime that controls Beijing, Communist Party of China, has imposed sanctions on Boeing and other defense contractors over sales of weapons to Taiwan. So this is a trend that's going to pick up some serious steam, and this is something that I'm surprised, frankly, has not been used more, is sanctions. But the soft power infrastructure now favors the East. So they will be able to sanction and prevent companies such as Boeing, such as Lockheed Martin, such as Raytheon from being able to manufacture weapons and transport them at all. So, but that's not all of Boeing's troubles, from a blown out door mid-flight to serious problems with turbulence to major problems with loose bolts and all kinds of other horrific safety failures that were apparently routine, and Boeing whistleblowers turning up dead. I think it's pretty clear that the cover-up has failed, and that people are starting to take notice at high levels of powerful governments, be they adversarial or not. So let's move on to some other GDP growth forecasts. Now, I did show GDP growth forecasts for a 4-year time frame from 2024 to 2028, but I'm going to focus on a few in the Middle East specifically and what their GDP growth forecasts are for this year. And I think there's going to be some names in this list that may or may not surprise you. But if I'm looking at the Middle East, here are the top 10. Okay. Libya is expected to see a GDP growth this year of 7.8%. United Arab Emirates, 3.5%. Bahrain, 3.6%. Iran, 3.3%. Egypt, which is undergoing horrible economic conditions right now, is expected to go up by as much as 3%. Qatar, 2%. Saudi Arabia, 2.6%. Jordan, 2.6%. Israel, 1.6%, which surprises me, especially considering the blockade activity, what that GDP growth forecast is expected to be. Now, these are IMF statistics, and you can take them or you can leave them. And rounding off that list is Oman at 1.2%. So pretty steady growth across the board there. But Israel being below Jordan, which has a significantly smaller economy than Israel, speaks volumes. But especially Egypt outpacing Israel's GDP growth by a factor of 2 or nearly 2 should tell you even more. That tells me that GDP is shifting out of Israel and into those other economies as a result of those blockades, because normally Israel would be at the top of this list. Now, if we move towards Eurasia, what does that look like? So Russia is expected to go up by 3.2% this year, which is behind Libya, the UAE, Bahrain, and Iran. So their GDP is expected to go up less than that of Iran, which is interesting. Turkey, 3.1%, Poland, 3.1%, Hungary, 2.2%, Greece, 2%, Spain, 1.9%, Ireland, 1.5%, Norway, 1.5%, and Switzerland, 1.3%. And the list is rounded off by less than single-digit gains for France, Italy, Netherlands, UK, Germany, and Sweden put together. So what this chart tells me is that GDP growth is flooding to Middle East economies with money, and it's running away as fast as it can from European economies that are saber-rattling. So that's what the charts tell me, is that there is a capital flight situation that is about to hit Europe, and that's about to hit Israel, as well as the United States of America eventually at some point. Capital flight risk is very high with the economic warfare that we're witnessing on the national and international level. Now the SEC on Monday had told exchanges that their products or where products would list, that and that it is leaning towards approving them according to people familiar with the matter. What are those products? Well, Ethereum ETFs. And they later put out guidelines to approve those Ethereum ETFs as quickly as possible. So that's likely going to lead to an altcoin season for the ages, because once ETH pumps past all-time high and keeps going up, that is a rising tide that lifts lots of altcoin boats. So we might have an altcoin season this summer after all. Moving on. Now, this is back to more fund confiscations. So Russia is engaging in more retaliatory fund confiscations as a result of the funds that were recently stolen from it to hand to Ukraine. They just confiscated 800 million euro from Deutsche Bank, Unicredit, and Commerzbank. This was on May 21st. This is from a Zero Hedge article. So after 2 years of being on the receiving end, and this is a quote from the article, quote, after 2 years of being on the receiving end of a weaponized global reserve currency, getting booted from SWIFT, countless toothless sanctions, and watching some $350 billion of its assets be frozen and later confiscated, Moscow has had enough. And over the weekend, the Financial Times reported that a St. Petersburg court seized around $800 million worth of assets belonging to those three banks. And the seizure marks one of the largest moves against Western lenders since Moscow's invasion of Ukraine prompted most international lenders to withdraw or wind down their businesses in Russia. Many of them simply rebranded. They didn't necessarily wind them down, so that's partially true. It comes after the ECB told the Eurozone lenders with operations in the country to speed up their exit plans. And according to court documents, the court seized 463 million worth of its assets belonging to Italy's Unicredit, equivalent to about 4.5% of its assets in the country under management. That's a huge haircut, ladies and gentlemen. And this is according to the latest financial statement from the bank's main Russian subsidiary. So there is a hard split coming between the Eastern and Western financial systems. And it's going to have a massive impact on the European and eventually the American economy as a result. And it's not going to be good. So start diversifying. Now, moving on to some additional interesting news out of Eastern Europe, specifically Serbia. I haven't covered Serbia very much, but there was a recent post by Milorad Dodik, who is the president of the Republic of Serbia. It was made to his Twitter X account, and this is translated from Serbian. By the decision on the resolution in Srebrenica on the UN General Assembly, the end of BIH was signed, and BIH he's specifically talking about the Bosnia and Herzegovina alliance. And tomorrow, at the secession of the government of Serbia in Srebrenica, a peaceful separation will be proposed to the federal side. Basically, he's stating that Serbia is going to secede from Bosnia and Herzegovina. So that means that there is likely to be conflict in the Balkans again. Now, on the national level in the United States of America's economic news, there have been several successful attempts to block central bank digital currencies from being implemented on the national and state level. The U.S. House just passed a bill that would block the creation of a central bank digital currency by the Federal Reserve. That passed the House with, I believe, around 216 votes. It was pretty much right along party lines. So I don't know what the fate of that bill is. It's like it could be vetoed. Something else could happen to it. It could go to the Senate and not be passed. It's hard to say. But with the protestations of Donald Trump and people close to Mr. Trump, the optics, at least for now, are that the plan is to establish the cryptocurrency markets as a market that America leads the world in. To what extent is not clear. It's more rhetoric than an actual plan, in my opinion, especially considering some of the other public statements not related to crypto. You know, there's not a lot of actionable intelligence you can gather from that because it's simply rhetoric. It's just campaign rhetoric. But the bills that are passing states are clearly being done as a way to assert 10th Amendment rights to prevent this creeping threat from becoming a reality. Moving on. Okay. Something else about operational security I wanted to bring up earlier that I neglected to, but I'll cover it now, is about iOS version 17.5.1. Now, this update, and I'm going to read to you the release notes of this update. Quote, this update provides important bug fixes and addresses a rare issue where photos that experienced database corruption could reappear in the photos library even if they were deleted. Close quote. Read between the lines here, ladies and gentlemen. What does that mean? Well, that means if Apple's database that stores all of your files, whether you've deleted them or not, could still display them. So when you delete something from the cloud, it's never deleted. It's there forever. Okay. Apple's been saving all of your deleted files and data. So your data is not safe in the hands of big tech companies. It never has been, and it never will be, ladies and gentlemen. Moving on. Another big news from big tech, TikTok has announced that they are going to lay off a large percentage of their global workforce. And this was announced on May 22nd. That was on Wednesday. Now, current employees allege that TikTok will be sending layoff notifications to an unspecified number of staffers. It is not clear to me how many of them were laid off at this exact moment, but this is undoubtedly linked to the TikTok ban bill. And that was after U.S. President Joe Biden signed a law that bans the social media platform unless China's ByteDance sells it to a U.S.-based company. So they're likely laying off their employees as a way to prepare for lawsuits against the government, which they have filed. So it's highly unlikely that TikTok is going to survive this, in my opinion. And the reason why is simply because too much of its market is in America, and not enough of its users are privacy focused in terms of being able to know how to get around geofencing. So I would expect that these types of sizable layoffs, it's not going to be easy to reacquire that kind of staff if you're laying off that many people in one go. So, and it's possible they could win their lawsuit. So, the main component of the lawsuit is that the United States government is violating freedom of speech, and it's hard to argue that. So, keep an eye on that, ladies and gentlemen. Now, moving on to the next story. 3 countries in Europe have formally recognized Palestine as a state. Those countries are Spain, Norway, and Ireland. And a Zero Hedge article also published on May 22nd, which was Wednesday, goes over this in some detail. So the decades-long cause to push toward establishing a state of Palestine has gotten a huge boost as a result of this. And specifically for Norway, Ireland, and Spain, who announced on Wednesday that they would recognize Palestine as a state. Now, Israel has recalled their ambassadors from all 3 of those countries, and they have joined approximately 140 countries globally, which constitute approximately slightly more than 2/3 of UN countries. What that relates to proportionally with population, I'm not sure. Something similar. The formal recognition will take place on May 28th, which is 3 days from now, and comes as the official Palestinian death toll put out by Gaza's health ministry approaches 36,000 since the October 7th attacks. Now, that is buoyed by another blow to the Israeli regime when arrest warrants were put out for both Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, as well as two Hamas leaders, Haniyeh and Sinwar specifically. So that is coming up. Also, Germany announced publicly that if either Netanyahu or Gallant show up in Germany, then they will be obliged to arrest them and hand them over to the ICJ in The Hague. So it is highly unlikely that any Israeli officials will be traveling to European countries anytime soon. They will only be able to travel to countries where the Rome Statute has not been signed. The United States of America is one of those countries. So increasing international isolation of the Israeli state is continuing apace as we speak. Now, something else that I wanted to add about the CBDC banning bill that I mentioned earlier. Not only does it ban the Fed from allowing from issuing one, but it also bans the Fed from allowing a third-party contractor, such as a commercial bank, from issuing them as well. Interestingly, prior to the establishment of the Federal Reserve, it was commercial banks that issued most of the money, and now they issue almost all of it. Now, an early version of the bill allowed commercial banks to do one, but Wall Street Silver helped to stop it by applying pressure earlier this year with tweets and getting people to call on the co-sponsors to change it to a complete ban. So they were trying to get it in through the back door by claiming that they were banning it, and it wasn't really a ban. So, public pressure works. Moving on. Something else from Microsoft that's important from an operational security standpoint, if you're using LinkedIn, Microsoft is planning an AI computing resources specifically for LinkedIn called Copilot. Okay, so if you're looking at what Microsoft is doing with the Windows operating system with Recall, looking at what they're doing with Copilot, it's no better. So if you're on LinkedIn, now's the time to consider deleting your accounts or simply not posting anything on them. But it is crucially important, in my opinion, to stop using these platforms, because there's no point in using anything for commerce if you're being spied on all the time. Because this spying is not simply monetizing stuff to sell to people, which is bad enough. It's specifically to target you militarily. Okay. So it's very important to not ever touch these platforms again. And the fewer users that these platforms have, the faster they'll go under. Okay. Don't allow yourself to be intimidated by these people. Stop using their products. There is no one resource to go for. Don't get sucked into brand loyalty. Don't do it. This is how they get you. Moving on. And some sad news. Our beloved Kabosu, who is the face of the Dogecoin meme, the fun meme dog that everyone loves, has passed away at the age of 18 after a long battle with cancer. Kabosu was a very sweet puppy dog, and Kabosu will very much be missed. A legendary dog. Moving on. So we've got quite a bit of interesting news in big tech. Nvidia, their market cap is now bigger than the market cap of the entire German stock market and the GDPs of both Canada and Russia. I'm going to say that again for emphasis, ladies and gentlemen. The market cap of Nvidia is bigger than the GDP of Canada, bigger than the GDP of Russia, and bigger than the entire German stock market. Why? Because their infrastructure is being used for AI. And that AI is going to be largely directed towards Theta Network, in my opinion. There had been rumors circulating around from influencers that Nvidia and Theta have a close relationship in this context. I think it's more of an indirect relationship, because Nvidia has their own profit centers, whereas Theta has created everything into a profit center. And these chipsets have significantly better throughput than existing chipsets that cannot handle high performance computing workloads, also known as HPC workloads. So expect Nvidia to be a huge player in the space. It's already a huge player that has outpaced entire market caps of countries. So that should give you an idea as to the balance of power between the private and the public is changing in ways that we cannot predict. Okay. Now, there was a foreign agent law that was passed in Georgia, and as a result, the United States has announced travel bans for politicians that were behind it. Now, the reason for this is obvious because the National Endowment for Democracy and many other NGOs, there's like one NGO roughly for every 150 people in the state of Georgia, which borders Russia and the Caucasus Mountains directly to the south. So they're on the eastern periphery of the Black Sea region. So keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen. We've got interference, open interference into Georgian politics by Western countries, specifically in the United States, because they were trying to use Georgia as another front against Ukraine, not against Ukraine, but in tandem with Ukraine in war against Russia. They were trying to open up a front there. They're trying to open up a front there. They want to open more fronts, right? Because they're losing the battle. And Georgia wasn't having it, because they saw what happened the last time they had a puppet ruler, Mikhail Saakashvili, attack two of his own enclaves, Abkhazia and it was Abkhazia and South Ossetia, and blame it on the Russians when it was actually them. It's a false flag. And the U.S. media was out in droves trying to demonize Russia for it when Russia was actually intervening to keep Georgian troops from slaughtering their own people. And they ended up successfully marching all the way to Tbilisi and then stopped and left the country. Basically, they said that we don't want to fight you. We're not your enemy, and they were right. It was later revealed that Mikhail Saakashvili was later on the State Department's payroll. He was literally an asset of the State Department on their payroll while he was the head of state of Georgia. So not every quote unquote elected leader is who you think they are. Some of them are literally employees of a private company. All right, so moving on. As I've reported in some previous podcasts, the USS Ronald Reagan is a maritime naval vessel that has its own carrier strike group that was built from the melted steel from the destroyed World Trade Center towers. It has been deployed to the Philippine Sea to counter China's, quote, punishment exercise around Taiwan. Now, what this is referring to is there was a military operation that was conducted by the PLA and the Chinese Navy that simulated an encirclement of the Taiwanese island, and that maneuver was successful according to GPS maps as well as satellite data. So it's clear that China intends to reunify Taiwan into the mainland. And interestingly, Serbia has reached out to China and brokered an alliance with China. And this is an interesting development because it was the bombing of the Chinese embassy in Belgrade in 1999 that was the beginning of the souring of relations between China and the West. And China has not forgotten that bombing that happened 25 years ago. So this shows that actions have consequences, ladies and gentlemen. If you blow up people's embassies, that might end up bringing together those types of countries that would, in other types of historical epochs, would have been brutal mortal enemies into being best friends and understanding that when you live by the sword, you die by it as well. So this is an important development because it means that Eastern Europe doesn't simply have their backs to the wall and they're only friends of the Russians. They've got friends further in the East too, and they will get more friends as well. So I expect that the Eastern European peripheries are going to be a battleground between East and West for influence. And that influence is rapidly declining on the Western side. Expect that to continue. Eventually, I expect to see Europe and Russia merge. I don't think that the European Union will exist in 10 to 15 years. That's my opinion. And I think that Russian influence across the world, as well as economic opportunity generation, is going to be unprecedented in humanity's history. I could be wrong, but the trends lead me to believe that that is indeed the case. Moving on. Now, Bloomberg has reported that United States-based fast food brands are facing a, quote, challenging operating environment in Asia. And this is as a result of boycotts, not just Asia, but the Middle East as well, and some parts of Europe, as a result of boycotts due to the ongoing genocide campaign in the Gaza Strip that has been, in which the United States is complicit in, along with Israel. So that indicates to me that those areas, Asia, Middle East, and some parts of Europe, aren't going to have US-based businesses there for much longer, especially businesses that are in the retail realm. I don't expect that Western influence is going to improve with the East for a very long time, for at least a generation, perhaps longer. But it will take time to repair relations, and there will be different people that will be negotiating that in the future. More economic news out of the UK. So the UK government is, according to another Bloomberg article, is facing the, quote, hardest fiscal challenge in 70 years, close quote. So the Institute for Fiscal Studies director, Johnson, this is, I don't know his first name. It's not published in this particular article. But he stated that the next British government will face challenges not seen since the 1950s. And I quote, money is tight. Government services are struggling. Taxes are at historically high levels, and both parties are constrained by their concrete promises to reduce the debt, close quote. He also went on to state that policymakers have three paths out of the crisis, according to him. One is painful spending cuts. Two is raising taxes to an 80-year high, or significantly increasing debt. No, of course, he does not present the option of, removing, the city of London from the equation, or nationalizing the money, or nationalizing the Bank of England, or getting to the root cause of these horrible financial situations, but simply getting approved talking points for what their puppet rulers are allowed to do. Right? What will actually be done? I think that there's going to be painful spending cuts, and those spending cuts are going to come in defense. So all the saber rattling in terms of war is not going to happen, because Britain isn't prepared to fight a war. They're not. They have ships that run aground. They have all kinds of technical problems with their naval vessels. There are significant problems in the UK armaments industry, and also protests of various arms manufacturers in relation to what's going on in the Gaza Strip. Speaking of the Gaza Strip, the famed $300+ million, or I don't know exactly how much money this pier cost. It was hundreds of millions. The so-called floating pier, it broke apart and it drifted into the Mediterranean Sea before it washed up on the shore near Ashdod, Israel. So, I don't know who built it, but I wonder if it was Boeing. Moving on. Interesting news from Spectator Index on their Twitter X account. They posted on May 23rd that, and this is news from the United States, the Wall Street Journal has reported that 63% of new IRS audits have targeted taxpayers with income of less than $200,000, that only a small overall share reached the very highest earners. So what does this mean? Well, this means that, the rich don't pay taxes, only the little people do, right? But it's interesting that they're doing these types of audits, especially considering that I expect this type of policy saber rattling directed at the working class or middle classes of the United States of America is going to lead to a tax revolt. I think that's going to happen. I think that people are going to stop paying taxes as a form of protest. They're going to refuse to cooperate with the IRS. They're not going to do those things anymore. And there's going to be a backlash. And at some point, the ICJ case is going to factor into this as well, because technically speaking, ladies and gentlemen, if your government is complicit in genocide, you're within your legal rights to withhold taxes from them. That's why the IRS is going so hard on this. So just keep that in mind. Don't fall for it. Don't let them intimidate you. Okay, moving on. Now, I don't have that many more talking points to go over, but I did want to mention something very important about Europe that isn't being discussed much, but their working age population. Okay, so if you look at the working age population of the European Union 13 years ago in 2011, it was 270 million people. Today, and this is after multiple waves of mass migration as a result of Washington and Europe's wars in the Middle East, has actually declined to 261 million as of this year. Declined by 9 million people. So it's 9 million out of 270. Well, that's almost 4% of their entire working age population has disappeared. So what does that mean? That means that Europe, like the United States, is going to have a full employment labor crisis. And they're touting immigration as the solution to it, but it's clearly not, because their working age population is going down even after that. But what else is the factor? The inoculations that were publicly acknowledged to cause blood clots by AstraZeneca. So the fallout from that is still being made known to us, as we can see. Now, my last talking point of the day is about crypto. I don't usually cover anything that Donald Trump posts from his social media accounts, but this is relevant, so it's probably worth covering. Now, this is not from Donald Trump's Twitter account, but from his Truth Social account. And quote, this particular post was in all caps, interestingly. Quote, I am very positive and open-minded to cryptocurrency companies and all things related to this new and burgeoning industry. Our country must be the leader in the field. There is no second place. Crooked Joe Biden, on the other hand, is the worst president in the history of our country. Wants it to die a slow and painful death. That will never happen with me! Exclamation point. Close quote. So, Mr. Trump also claims that the current U.S. president, in this context, is essentially out to lunch. But at the same time that he's posting these types of things, he's also posting things in relation to shutting down peaceful protests, which are being rebranded as terrorism. And that is the biggest threat to freedom of expression in the United States of America, is the reclassification of even the most basic exercise of fundamental rights as terrorism. You're a terrorist if you want to eat at a restaurant. You're a terrorist if you want to protest against a foreign country. You're a terrorist if you walk down the street with the wrong hat on. These are simply ways of othering the population and radicalizing people against them. But clearly the rhetoric is no longer functioning in the way that it was intended. So I expect that these types of carrots are out there to soften up the messaging so that there's at least something to benefit from a purported Trump presidency. So we will see how that plays out in the political state and over the course of the next 1 to 3 years. But I think it's good for America that we're leaders in the cryptocurrency industry, but I don't think that we will be because of our economic policies vis-a-vis Russia and the wars. Nobody's going to want to do business with us because the ICJ cases are going to expand, and they're going to expand to every country that sold them arms, every country that provided them with weapons, every country that provided them with troops. And who is the primary benefactor? The United States of America, including Donald Trump. So this could be much ado about nothing. It could simply be an empty phrase campaign promise. It could be true. Whenever you're covering politics, power comes from lying and getting people to play along. So those are the last of my talking points, Jason. If you got any Q&A, feel free to hit me up on that. And other than that, I'll pass it over to you for TA.
All right. Thank you as always, Chris. Sorry it took me a second to get off the mute there. I was using a different configuration I thought was going to help, and it didn't. So, um,
Okay.
yeah, wild ride as always, man. There's a lot going on there. I honestly, I just want to circle back for some of our people that maybe aren't quite as tech savvy, and I mean even including myself at this point. What would
Hmm.
probably be the best place to start in terms of sort of reversing having to be reliant on Microsoft or Windows? If you bought a Windows PC, like what's the first step you should take at this point? You just want to wipe your operating system and install Linux, or what?
No, the first step if you're running Microsoft Windows is to get all of your data off of it. Get it to external storage, ideally USB storage. Don't put it in the cloud. Keep it offline. That's step number one. Make sure you get all of your data off. Once you get your data off, then you can use a program uh, called Derek's Boot and Nuke, DBAN, also known as DBAN. It's commonly used in data centers to wipe hard drives, to wipe storage clusters, and it's very effective and it's free. So Derek's Boot and Nuke, that will do a one pass zero wipe is usually pretty effective. There can also be a three pass zero wipe that utilizes DoD standards, but the more passes that you choose, the longer it takes to wipe the drive. It's just a matter of what standard you wish to follow. But for most users, a one pass zeros wipe method will destroy all the data and all the volumes on that device. Uh, so you can do that first, and then you can follow the instructions for an appropriate Linux distribution that you wish to install, whether it's Linux Mint or Cubes OS, which were my top two recommendations. For the ultra paranoid, Cubes OS is probably going to be better for you because it does not use System D. And anybody that knows anything about Linux knows what System D is, but I'm not going to get into the technical details of that. But if you're ultra paranoid, Cubes OS, if you want something that's user friendly and all about ease of use and looks very much like Windows or Apple, Linux Mint is the way to go. But either of them are excellent choices. I like both operating systems very much.
All right, I've got limited experience with Linux. I've used it a little bit. I certainly haven't like run any installs or anything, but I've definitely moved around, and it seems
Also,
similar enough to Windows.
I wanted to mention, Jason, if you need to get a basic education on Linux Mint, which is where every Linux beginner should go to first because it's the easiest to use and it has the best driver compatibility. And they maintain drivers for hardware decades after its end of life, right? You're not going to get that from Microsoft products, but you will get it from Linux Mint. That should tell you a lot. So they continuously put out driver updates and security updates for chipsets long after they're no longer supported by their original manufacturer. So you can extend the life of these systems by a considerable number of years. And I've found that the build quality of some older systems is actually far superior to that of some newer systems. So
Right on. Okay, so Linux Mint is essentially like it's based on Ubuntu. Then it's pretty much the same thing.
not quite. It utilizes Ubuntu's code, but it fixes a lot of the problems with Ubuntu. The biggest problem with Ubuntu is that Snap is built in, and Snap is known for having all kinds of malicious applications on its repo. And the first thing that, well, not the first thing, but one of the things that Linux Mint developers did was to remove Snap entirely from the distribution. They also patch and tend to patch issues with Ubuntu before the Ubuntu developers do. So that should tell you a lot about the dedication of Linux Mint developers. But if you're looking for an introduction on Linux Mint, go to the Linux TV channel on YouTube. They have an entire series on Linux Mint that's several parts, I believe 6 or 7 parts, something like this, that goes over every aspect of the operating system. I believe this was constructed in an older version of Linux Mint, like 19.x or 20.x, but it should still be relevant for most users.
Awesome information as always, man. Very, very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Obviously, just
You're welcome.
the idea of having to do that for a lot of people can probably be intimidating, depending on how much data and whatever else you have on your system. And I know for myself,
Well,
it's just
as soon as COVID
the
hit,
pain in the
as soon
ass
as
of
COVID
having
hit,
to
Jason,
configure all this stuff is just intimidating enough to
it's a
think
far
about.
bigger
But
it's a far bigger pain in the ass to lose all of your assets.
yeah,
Right.
you would think.
Don't be lazy.
Thankfully, I don't really use my Windows computer for a whole lot of trading. There's one MetaMask wallet that I've connected through Windows. It has a, you know, small amount of assets on it. Nothing that I would think that Bill Gates would want to come after, but
Just a heads up, MetaMask, you know what the word meta means in Hebrew? Dead. Yeah. So just saying.
how do you even like translate that though? Like what does that mean? Dead mask? Like is it?
Well, think of the Slayer tune "Dead Skin Mask"
Oh man, yeah,
and
I
read the
guess.
lyrics and compare them to current events.
I guess. All right.
Not, and the only reason I know that is because I used to listen to those types of tunes. I don't listen to that music anymore. I'm more of a into solfeggio music and things that aren't SoCal dudes yelling into a microphone and squealing at the top of their lungs and playing extremely fast chromatic guitar solos.
Yeah,
Used to be.
it's not really my thing these days either. I really would have to end up in an extreme mood to want to listen to any of that.
Yeah, yeah. Unless you're lifting weights, it's kind of defeats the purpose. But the only reason I bring up the reference is because of that. And then you look at that and other predictive programming propaganda from shows such as Game of Thrones, like the Faceless Men and the Hall of Faces. And then you got Made a Mask, right? And what do you put on your face? A mask, a face mask. And what was everybody doing in 2020? Putting on masks.
I gotcha.
Getting
All
it?
right, I get it. I
Yeah.
gotcha. So,
Yeah.
I'm gonna kind of bridge into something real quick here before we really jump into a lot of the TA. And obviously, we're about halfway through what people would consider a bull market, right? And a lot of people still aren't on board with the fact that it is, but it is from every technical indication. We're proceeding through, what a lot of people are looking at as like, the fourth out of five phases to the bull market, and the fifth phase is a parabolic phase that can last for quite a while. So I think we're kind of resetting and accumulating here, but we've seen, so much in terms of all of these shit coins, meme coins, everything else that's hit the space. And there's just so much stuff out there. So I just want to warn people, first of all, just be careful. There was a coin that went out on the base ecosystem, and there's a lot of these on base. So be careful if you're on base. There's plenty of rug pulls. But this coin called Coomer. All right. Coomer started out, at fractions of a penny and moved up, thousands of a percent. And it pretty much dumped right back to where it was at. Just completely dumped. And you'll see the chart on the on the video, but it's down to an 83K market cap from, quite a bit more than that. Like I think probably about $500,000. So be careful when you're messing with these small coins. If you're messing with these small coins, it's really, really not all it's cracked up to be. So just have a plan, understand what you're getting into in terms of what these assets are, and hopefully nobody that was in my community bought this thing. I don't think anybody did, but again, just be careful out there, folks, because there's going to be more of this, a lot more of this as we go through the next 12 months of this bull run. Especially, I would think early next year, you're going to see so many rug pulls, it's going to be insane, because everybody's going to be trying to exit the market, and they're going to be creating these shit coins for people to create exit liquidity with. So be very, very careful with what you're doing out there. Do not risk more than you're willing to lose, especially into smaller cap projects. So with all that said, I'll jump into the larger portion of the TA for the show. We do still have the DXY consolidating in this sort of an ascending pattern. So I would really like to see this break down from this pattern and break down from the 200 daily, which it actually is looking like right now. It has a little bit of support at. The daily is also being rejected at the 21 MA. So below the 21 MA, price action will remain bearish, but I would like to see what looks to be potentially a bit of a head and shoulders type of a thing forming here. I would really like to see that pattern break down. Okay, and the breakdown of that pattern could take us back to test this 200 weekly, which would be, you know, just below the 100 level for the DXY. That would be bullish for our markets, right? So as we move over to the CME futures, in terms of where they closed at, CME closed at 69,080 at the end of the week. All right, I'm not 100% sure if they're opening up Sunday or if they're closed for the Memorial Day holiday. I know the stock markets are closed for the Memorial Day holiday. Just a quick view of the macro. Get rid of that fib there, and you know, we're still at support here and we're flagging out on the macro. The stochastics are turning, haven't confirmed bullish yet on the weekly. And then in terms of the RSI, that's right at that 70 level trying to break through. So I would think if we see confirmation on the stochastics, see the RSI break back into this overbought territory as well. And a couple of nice bullish candles coming in there, looking pretty good. In terms of my Coinbase chart here, that actually took off on me a little bit. Kind of been using this for a little bit of reliance on our moving averages. All right, so we're in a little bit of a flag there right now. The price action actually below 21 MA. There was a rejection here at the 50, but now we're bouncing and above the 100 and well above the 200. This is on the 1 minute chart, keep in mind. So pretty zoomed in here on the BTC price action. As we move out to the 1 hour, we're well above the 21 MA. So looking fairly bullish there with a cross above the 100. And you've got your 200 MA down here around 68.3, 68.4. So could we see a potential retest of that level? It's possible. This is an odd pattern that's forming here. All right. So almost looks like potentially we're forming a parallel uptrend channel. So your next target on something like that would be like right around this area here, like just below 70,000. I think if you were to see like a significant break and closure above this spider line, that would bring some momentum in. It's almost like a weird cup and handle. It's a bit of a weird pattern. This type of a thing, right? So we'll keep an eye on that. There's still some consolidation going on, and honestly a lot of sideways over this weekend would make sense. If we just stay sideways above support, even if we just close the week above like 65.5, 66K, it's going to be pretty bullish. I honestly don't see a pullback to that level. It just doesn't seem likely. Almost seems like right now you might be getting, you know, something like this going on. All right, so let's keep an eye on that, you know, and it may be like it's a little more complex. Okay, so it's definitely looking head and shoulders-ish for the smaller time frames right now. This hourly, got your stochastics curving up, so looks like you got a little bit of a support line on the RSI there as well. We'll watch that flag through the weekend, and you know, we've got a point of control here as well, so We'll watch for potential rejection around that 69.6, 69.7 level. All right, but Bitcoin's looking pretty good. Still holding my long position from about 63K. So looking good there. And a little different way to maybe cut it up. This is the MEXC perpetual futures. This could potentially be like a falling broadening wedge. You can see we've got this parallel channel once again. But this could be like your neckline of the wedge and like your inverse head and shoulders here. So just keep an eye on these patterns. You know, pattern trading can be a bit ambiguous. You really want to rely on support and resistance first of all. Pattern trading kind of comes in next. And to me, your oscillators and divergence backs that up. So keep an eye on all that stuff. I don't see anything particularly bearish right now. I like the consolidation at this point. If we look at BTC dominance, potentially seeing a bearish retest here, but I'm not totally sold on it being that because you do have a hidden bullish divergence. Okay, and this is on the daily time frame. Keep in mind the consolidation looks to be taking place above a point of control. And although it does look like a potential bearish retest of this rising wedge, the oscillators and the divergence, in my opinion, says that this comes back up into this pattern. So we'll keep an eye on that. If it comes back up into the pattern, it may still have the ability to make that final move. If we see a large move up for Bitcoin into like the $80,000 territory, I would expect dominance to potentially follow into this 59 to 60% level that we've been looking at. So keep an eye on that as well. Breakdown would retest the 200 daily at 53.5% and the 200 weekly at 49.25%. All right. Moving on to tether dominance. Bear with me here. Tether dominance, we may be having a bearish retest right now. Zoom out a little bit. Take a look here. So there was a bit of a pump. Flag's broken down to the 21 MA on the 4-hour. Stochastics are still curving down. RSI kind of has this thing going on where it looks more like it's consolidation at this point, just below that 21 MA. So we'll keep an eye on that for tether dominance. Even the daily looks like it's trying something, right? Like it's making a little bit of, higher highs after the breakdown from this head and shoulders. Some people are looking at this as a bearish retest. Not 100% sold on that. I'd like to see the stochastics curve back down into the oversold territory to really confirm that. It's kind of tough to chop up with those wicks, but let's just eliminate those. Look at them as outliers, right? That may be like a potential falling wedge here. Bull flag type of a thing for tether dominance. And that'd run you up something like that. Take you up to this next volume node. 4.75% area for the tether dominance. And obviously that would indicate that there will be some selling going into next week. Keep in mind too, we've got a monthly close coming up here towards the end of next week as well. So I would expect some volatility as the markets open up next week after the holiday and then going into the monthly close. Be very careful. Don't be afraid to take profits if you have some on the table. If we look at total 3 here, total 3 is kind of flagging out. Looks like a potential breakout. And there was this larger, like, falling, broadening wedge type of thing, right? Let's move out a little bit further, get a little better look at that flag. And to me, this kind of looks like breakout and retest for your altcoins. So as long as the stochastics stay in a position of strength, continue to, point up and have that blue line above the red, you'll make another move up here for the altcoins and create another high. You know, 0.5 fib is going to be a resistance at around $712 billion. And, you know, you've got the top of this pattern up here, this consolidation. There's going to be some resistance just above that between about 732 to 757. Above that, we can finally move up to this golden pocket. That would be a large move for the altcoins. I was looking for that to potentially happen here. Did not play out. Seen some consolidation. Looks like bullish consolidation to me for right now. If we move over to Ethereum, Ethereum's in kind of an odd pattern right now. This was a little bit of a megaphone pattern. Now it's kind of consolidating into a bit of a tight triangle. So is this like a diamond? Or what are we looking at here? This is, you know, symmetrical consolidation at a point of control. Keep in mind we're on the 1 hour here. There is just a touch, mind you. We'll zoom in there to make that a little cleaner. That's hidden bullish divergence. Okay, so I'll explain this. You can see here you're swinging down, closing in the price action just slightly lower here, slightly higher here. But when we zoom in on the RSI, it is the opposite. You closed a little higher here and a little lower here, creating that hidden bullish divergence. So right now, this candle did come up above the 21 MA, so that consolidation is taking place on the hourly for Ethereum, just above that bullish level at the 21 MA. So we'll see if that consolidation continues. And I mean, you've got, you know, got this area here. It's getting pretty tight. All right, so we'll keep an eye on that. ETH BTC is also kind of tight in this pattern, you know, depending on how you cut this. Could say that you're still consolidating pretty nicely for that pair. And honestly, you know, you got this flag that's forming, right, on the daily. You're above the 200 daily moving average. This consolidation, I really would like to see this hold the 200 daily. If you come back down and bounce off the 21 MA, that's fine, as long as you retake the 200 daily and establish that as some type of support at some point and don't make a lower low. This pair is going to take off. Okay, so for right now, we'll have to watch this flag and this breakout. If there's a breakdown of the 21 MA and a new low, then there's just going to be further consolidation for Ethereum, and that's going to be that. I mean, if this is going to be looked at as, you know, potential breakout or retest, maybe it can come back down, create another low, create a bullish divergence to work off of. But, you know, for right now, this news of what essentially is an Ethereum ETF approval has this consolidation occurring just above a critical level at this 200 daily. So I have been waiting for the pair to retake that level for quite a while, and it finally has. So we'll keep an eye on that on the daily. Daily essentially has to hold that for continuation to occur and a challenge of this 200 weekly to occur, which is sitting at around 0.059 Satoshis for the Ethereum BTC pair. Moving along, I do have a lot of altcoins to cover. I'm going to try to be quick here. BNB is still consolidating. Third largest cryptocurrency by market cap. Looks to be a healthy consolidation at this time. As long as it remains in this flag, this thing is going to attempt a higher high, and the next targets would be around $774 and then just above $1,000 if this pattern target does complete. So I would really like to see that. That would bring in thousands of dollars for me on my BNB trade. I do currently have longs open right now on Bitcoin, Ethereum, BNB, and XRP. I am in a nice profit on this long for XRP, which I did take from around the 50-cent level. And right now, this looks like healthy consolidation and a bit of an ascending triangle on the smaller time frames. If we do see a breakdown of this, need a retracement. do see a breakdown of that. You're looking at coming back down to this golden pocket. That's around 51 cents. So if you're looking for an entry on XRP, you could potentially look there. I would like to see this point of control hold through the weekend. And potentially this is creating like a larger ascending triangle or something of that nature if we look at those wicks as being more anomalous. All right. So we'll continue to take a look at that for XRP. There's bigger things brewing on this chart, honestly. Like this chart can do things. When we take a look here at the daily, clean this up a little bit. This chart can definitely do some things, because it does look to be in a larger ascending triangle type of a pattern, higher lows. All right, so you're above the 21 MA, and you are also overbought on the Stokes, but your RSI is still in a territory where this can move higher. So if we zoom out a little further, even to like a 3-day, this to me looks like it's just getting started. You got bullish engulfing, you're challenging the 21 MA on the 3-day. So, you know, you have a newly minted 200 weekly moving average to contend with on the MEXC perpetual futures for XRP, and that level is tight with the 200 daily, just between about just under 58 cents, just below 59 cents. So about 57.7 to 58.7 cents. Breakout above that area, you have a very, very good chance of flipping that to support. There's a volume gap here currently that we're working with on this larger time frame, so I do expect this to be challenged. That would also net me quite a nice amount of money for what I risked for XRP. And if it does move up to $1 or higher, that trade will net me thousands of dollars for only risking a very small amount of money. So with that said, I'm going to move on. I do have a number of requests for other altcoins from the Discord, but I do have one that I want to cover here first of all, which is AERO. AERO kind of broke out of a falling broadening wedge here. It's been consolidating in this pattern. You could almost say potentially right now this is forming this uptrend channel. All right, so we'll keep an eye on that. AERO broke out of a uptrend channel similar to that the last time. Price action is bullish above the 21 MA on the 4-hour. And, you know, you're getting a little heated on your stochastics, so we'll keep an eye on that. But I do like this coin. I like the continued consolidation. You can maybe even chop this up like this. You know, this coin makes some funny looking flags. So watch your divergences and you know, watch your oscillators. But I do like this coin. I have been accumulating it. I do have a fairly large position at this point, and I am looking for not only this $1.34 and $1.57 target, but to challenge these previous highs, all right, which were above $2, around $2.37. Okay, so I do see those new highs coming for AERO. If we look at this as a bit of an ascending triangle, it could be a bull flag, and it could take us up to this next extension, which is around $3.30. That would be a very nice gain for me. I would definitely be taking profits at that level. All right. So, number of other coins to cover here. I'm going to cover ONDO. Looks to be flagging out quite nicely. And it's so funny. Sometimes when I draw these lines here for a measured move, if I'm accurate with, you know, putting it right at the breakout level, sometimes the breakout will actually follow the line which ONDO is doing right now. This isn't like a support line that I meant to draw, but the price action is just following it. I just find that funny. ONDO right now is trying to break a bearish divergence that came in on the 4-hour. You can see here you're swinging lower on the RSI but higher in price action. It is attempting to break that right now. Breakout of that would present a significant move, probably above this $1.36 level, and potentially fulfill this pattern target, which would be around $1.69 for this ascending triangle. Okay, I would look for some sort of a retest after that if it were to hit that level. Okay, we zoom out and look at the daily. I have to keep an eye on this. Looks like this is breaking any potential divergence, so that's good. You're well above a potential buy zone. If this comes back down, 80 cents would be an attractive level to look at. So if you miss this, you're going to look for two levels, right? You're going to look for that 80-cent level, or you're going to look for a retest of this pattern and the 21 MA. So if this continues to curve up, 21 MA comes above this, you may just retest that as support. And you can kiss 80 cents goodbye. That obviously would, represent a significant pullback at this point of about 33%. And I'm not sure the market is ready to yield that right now. Seems like the altcoins are probably just getting cooking. So higher targets probably coming for ONDO from the current level at about $1.25, $1.36, and $1.69 would be the next stops. So ONDO looking pretty good. We're going to bang through a number of other coins here. Did get a request for KDA. All right, that is Caledonia. It's high speed layer 1. It's a smaller cap coin. All right, take a look at Binance. There were some levels here, kind of an accumulation zone. All right, so technically this is still in what I would consider an accumulation range on the daily. So you're in like a really flat type of a flag, to be honest. So you're going to want to watch your oscillators and your divergences here. Is there anything jumping out at us on the daily? There is actually this, which goes back a little further. So it may just be that this thing is trying to gather a little more momentum to break out of this 50 level on the daily RSI. Zoom out a little bit and see if we can get a little perspective here. I think this 3-day can gain some momentum. All right. So there was like some hidden bullish divergence that came in here. All right. And that's likely started the next move up. We did get this like spike here, right? But now we're, forming like a long wick on this next candle. So looks like the buyers are still trying to come in and push this back up. You got a significant hurdle here at the 21 MA around 98 cents. If you flip about $1.05 into support, which is the 200 daily, this thing will make a much larger move. If we take an extension just from the recent move, next target for KDA would be around like $2.85 based on your fibs. You may see some resistance here around the $1.60 level. So if you're buying right now, it won't hurt to take profits at that level, especially since you're buying in pretty close to 80 cents. That would be almost double your money. So very safe level to take profits, and then let the bag run up to 250, 280 level. All right. So that'll be the rundown on KDA. Let's see here. Let's check out AVAX. AVAX has been making some decent moves like intraday here. Looks like you're consolidating nicely on the 3-day. I'm not seeing anything bearish there. Your daily is trying to consolidate above the 200 daily and above the 21 MA, above the point of control. It's a little bit of an odd consolidation, odd pattern. Looks like a few of the others that we just looked at. I hate it when the patterns don't give me the vibes that I'm looking for. Like realistically, it's a little bit of an ascending type of a thing, and it's just not like the bullish vibe that I look for. You know, you had your divergence come in here. So there was your bullish div that kind of sparked that bump from about, 32 up to about 41 and a half. You're just consolidating after that move now. So is this thing trying to do something like this? Keep an eye on that. That head and shoulders to take you up to that next volume node, so good confluence there. Move that level down just a little bit. So right around $54 would be the target area for that. It'd be a nice move for AVAX. If that holds support on the daily above that 200 daily moving average, that would be extremely bullish. All right. Something to keep in mind, I took my BNB trade after support was established at the 200 daily. So if you find support being established at the 200 daily and you're confident with that play, might be somewhere where you could open up one for AVAX. But keep in mind, as always, nothing that's being said here should be construed as financial advice. Get yourself a financial advisor. Do your own due diligence and research, folks, before jumping into any coin, investment, project, or trade. All right. With all that said, if you're enjoying the technical analysis and the news that we bring you, and if you've made it this far into what has turned into a little bit longer show this week, which I hope you folks appreciate. Honestly, we do our best to bring you, the best content that we can. Please honk the like button for me and get subscribed to the channel if you haven't for some odd reason. Make sure you're hitting the bell for notifications too. That way we'll bring you the podcast in a timely manner going forward. All right. So I did have a request from Xavier to take a look at CAS. So we'll take a look at CASPA. It's just chilling in between these levels that I had highlighted before where, this was like a trade range, right? So it's kind of a chop range. If you're trading this range, you make a lot of money if you're using a little bit of leverage. But if we take a look at this right now, I'll erase some of this old work because it's kind of irrelevant now. But depending on how we chop this up, if we look at maybe those wicks as outliers, this has got some bull flag vibes. All right. So, not angry at what I'm seeing for CASPA here. This is like... I don't know about the head and shoulders. All right. But it's honestly looking pretty strong right now on the daily. So, you're coming up here to this level. I mean, we're just opening a new candle now. So typically we don't have the recording going after the daily close. So this is good from a technical analysis perspective. This is actually pretty bullish. You got a bullish engulfing candle. And if you take a look at your RSI, there's no divergence there on the daily. So, any consolidation on the smaller time frame sideways for CASPA will be pretty bullish as long as it holds this level around 13.7 cents. Should allow it to move up, and your target on this pattern is looking pretty juicy. Oh, look, it goes right up to that last measurement that I had for 20 cents. which, you know, it never quite made it up there, but that was the next measured level that I have. So I love when confluence comes out on the chart like that. Decent chance that we see Caspa attempt to make that move up to that 20 cents level from just below 14 cents right now. So we'll keep an eye on that. Doesn't look too bad. All right. Moving on, we did cover Chia Network last week. Hopefully this thing will continue to move. All right. Take a look at the KuCoin chart. It gives us a little bit more. There's a little more history there. Daily's looking consolidative. Did create like a little bit of a lower low, but this isn't, you know, it's not a terrible pattern. And then you're sort of getting this apex here, right? So what you really want, and you know what's going to bring bullishness into, you know, any pair in this market at this point, is a firm establishment of the 200 daily moving average as support. This pair hasn't been able to do that. It's been spiking up, came back down, spiked up, came back down, bumped up against it, bumped up against it. You can see it's respecting it, bumped up against it twice. Okay, came back up, tried to establish this support, had a nice move. Okay, and now you came back down and you're back below it again. So this is all just playing with the 200 daily moving average, and they're liquidating people around this moving average that are just using this moving average as an indicator. So for right now, it looks like the oscillation is probably going to be back to the upside. In terms of what our fib's giving us here, you know, if you're entering right now at about $31.50, you're going to have a profit zone right around that golden pocket area, around 48.3. And if you were to like look at this as kind of a goofy flag and maybe a potential breakout area, oh look, it takes us right up to that area that I had highlighted once again, which is around $61.75. It's going to be a really important resistance for XCH. If it does break that level, I would expect a very large move to come in for this altcoin, and honestly this could be a dark horse for you folks. Again, not financial advice, but this thing does have potential to do 100x in this run. There is a upcoming IPO as well, so this thing's going to be hitting the stock market. Honestly, it's a good gamble. It's just a good gamble. I don't know what else to call it. All right, moving on. Did get a request to look at ZEPH. I think this thing's been taking a bit of a beating, but honestly, I wouldn't fret too much. This really is a bullish consolidative pattern. So I would just give it time. As long as it's in this wedge, you're fine. If it's coming down here and breaking new lows, okay, which would be like, and it held that double bottom nicely. You got to respect that. It held that double bottom nicely. But if it breaks like $1.93, $1.90, if it breaks that with any kind of volume, forget about it. But for right now, this thing has a chance to come back up to the top of the pattern, create a new high above $55. Next levels will be around $72 to $79, $80 area-ish for ZEPH. All right. Got a request from Ryan R, and I want to thank him for this, for Notcoin. All right. I forgot to look at that one on last week's show, as this did just recently drop on MEXC. I was able to mine this on my phone, which is fantastic. Right now, this isn't really looking all that strong. I've seen the patterns that look like this in this market so far turn into sell-offs. All right, it could be that you're seeing a breakout and retest. So I'll remain bullish on this pair for right now, because I do believe there's a ton of development going on, but it looks like the 4-hour has to reset. So we'll give the 4-hour a chance to reset. If you're buying this coin or looking at buying this coin, I wouldn't buy it at this level. I would try to look for a retest, maybe a double bottom, scrape that low again around, say, 0.0046. Okay. That would be the area that I would look to hold, maybe just a little bit above that if you really want your buy order to go in and be safe. Maybe hit that volume node at 0.0047. All right. This is involved with the Telegram app, and it is part of their infrastructure. You can use this to buy NFTs, and there's all kinds of stuff that they have planned for this ecosystem. So if you're holding this along with me, I guess we'll see what happens. All right. I got a request for SHRAP. Okay, SHRAP is a gaming token. This is one of Alex Becker's gems. I believe you have to get this thing on KuCoin. I'm not sure if it's on MEXC or not. Yeah, you can't get that on MEXC, so keep in mind you'll have to have access to those exchanges in order to grab that coin. Bybit, BitGet, CoinEx, Bitmart, etc. So 4 hour looks consolidative. Not seeing anything bearish here. It looks like a flag. Something like that. Break the point of control. Make a move up to about 17.5 cents. Be a decent gain from there, about a 40% gain or so. Take a look at the daily. This is what I like right here. Okay, so you just retook the 21 MA after a bullish divergence played out. All right, so typically that is very bullish. This actually looks like an excellent chart now that we've zoomed out to the daily. This looks like a screaming buy. It's a bit of a falling broadening thing going on here. I mean, let's take that from the point of control, be somewhat conservative, but it'll take you up to the top of the pattern, right? So your breakout would take you to about 44 cents. You'd then want to retest this pattern around this volume node around 33 cents. Be a great area to accumulate more, and you're going to be looking at really nice targets for this thing. All right, and if this is one of Becker's coins, you can expect it to perform. If the rest of the market moves, it'll move. And your next area of interest would be around like 66 cents. So potential 5x move, potential 5.5x move for SHRAP. All right, so good call there. Good call there, Ryan. One more request from Ryan. He asked to take a look at Jupe. I believe this is the Solana DEX. Looks like it's kind of starting what could potentially be a parallel uptrend channel. There's going to be resistance at $1.46 and $1.60. Above that, your breakout is going up to about $2.50. So could double up on Jupe if you're holding that coin. All right, I believe that was an airdrop for Solana holders. And I think the last one on the list for today is going to be AGIX. AGIX. Obviously, we had some discussions about AI leading up to the technical analysis portion of the podcast. And honestly, that stuff always creeps me out, folks. It always creeps me out. So if we were to get like full continuation here, $2.25, it sound about right. Let's take a look and see if the extension lines up. It's a little above that 1.618, so that actually takes you right into that $2 range, $1.99. So I'd look in between about $1.99 and $2.25 for the next target for AGIX. All right. So I think that's going to do it for today, folks. If you made it this far, God bless you. If you haven't on the way out, please make sure that you're honking the like button. It supports this channel. It's incredibly important to push our algorithm out to other people who may not have seen the channel. All right. And hit that bell for notifications. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And that way you will be notified when we drop these podcasts and updates in a timely manner in the future. With all that said, thank you so much. I'm Jason Bruce. Thanks again to my co-host as well, Christopher Lundy. Take care, everyone. Much love. God bless. Enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. Stay safe.